In 1984, Bruce Springsteen wrote an anti-war song highlighting how Vietnam War vets had been betrayed and abandoned by their own country. The song was insanely successful, but for all the wrong reasons. It had been grossly misinterpreted, to the extent that people saw it as a celebration of America. Springsteen soon received praise from people he was ideologically opposed to and had accidentally launched the most misunderstood song in music history. In 1969, 19-year-old Bruce Springsteen received a draft notice, meaning that he was required by law to fight in the Vietnam War. Speaking on stage, Springsteen recalled this moment and said, "I remember the day I got my draft notice. I hid it from my folks, and 3 days before my physical, me and my friends went out and stayed up all night. And we got on the bus to go that morning, man, and we were all so scared. And I went and I failed. I came home. It's nothing to applaud about." Springsteen had failed the physical examination needed to go to war, mainly due to a motorcycle accident that happened to him previously. Bruce went on to say, "But I remember coming home after I'd been gone for 3 days and walking in the kitchen, and my mother and father were sitting there. My dad said, 'Where you been?' I said, I wanted to take my physical." He says, "What happened?" I said, "They didn't take me." And he said, "That's good." For Springsteen and his family, this was good news. Springsteen's own father had fought in World War II, and its impact had left him with bouts of paranoia and depression. And 2 years before Bruce was drafted, his friend and former drummer Bart Haynes had fought and died in Vietnam. I remember the drummer in my first band coming over my house with his Marine uniform on, saying that he was going and that he didn't know where it was. And a lot of guys went and a lot of guys didn't come back. And the lot that came back weren't the same anymore. That being said, Springsteen still had a nagging sense of guilt that he was not chosen. Later in life, he reflected, "As I grew older, I sometimes wondered who went in my place. Somebody did." Thankfully, this war ended in 1975, but as Bruce knew all too well with his father, the people who fought in Vietnam would have physical and mental issues that would last decades, and perhaps a lifetime. In the same year that the Vietnam War ended, Springsteen had his first ever hit, Born to Run, and his career really started to take off. 3 years later, one of the most important moments in his life was in a gas station in Arizona where he stumbled across a book called Born on the 4th of July. It was a memoir by a man named Ron Kovic, who was enlisted in the Marines during the Vietnam War and returned to America paralyzed from the waist down. When asked why he wrote this book, Kovic said, "I wanted people to understand. I wanted to share with them as nakedly and openly and intimately as possible what I had gone through, what I had endured. I wanted them to know what it really meant to be in a war. To be shot and wounded, to be fighting for my life on the intensive care ward, not the myth we had grown up believing. I wanted people to know about the hospitals and the enema room, about why I had become opposed to the war, why I had grown more and more committed to peace and nonviolence." And in a strange twist of fate, Springsteen accidentally bumped into him at Hollywood's Sunset Marquis Hotel. He introduced himself, and they struck up a friendship. Through Kovic's story, Springsteen became more entrenched in the cause for Vietnam War vets. And in 1981, he performed a concert to raise money for the nonprofit Vietnam Veterans of America. At the time, the organization was on the verge of bankruptcy. John Terzano, who ran the organization's DC office, said, "The money gave us a new breath of life. We were saved. It didn't pay all of our bills, but gave us the shot and hope we needed. The only reason we survived is because Bruce came around in 1981. Eventually, Bruce decided to write a song about the hardships suffered by Vietnam War vets and how they had been abandoned since returning home. It was called Vietnam and speaks about the soft rejection veterans received when looking for work, where they would apologetically get turned down for jobs. In this verse, he sings, "Son, understand if it was up to me, about half the town's out of work. Ain't nothing for you here, from the assembly line to the front line, but I guess you didn't hear, you died in Vietnam." These lyrics would be repackaged for another demo of a song Bruce had titled Born in the USA. The song also tells the story of a Vietnam War veteran coming back home. The opening verse goes, "Born down in a dead man's town, the first kick I took was when I hit the ground. End up like a dog that's been beat too much, till you spend half your life just to cover it up. Now." The second verse talks about how they put a rifle in his hand so he could kill people. Another verse talks about the main character's realization that although the war was over, the Viet Cong, the communist organization they were sent to destroy, is still around. So was the war even worth it? It was an anti-war song which talked about the futility of war and the treatment of war veterans afterward. In the chorus, Bruce repeated the lines "Born in the USA" but with a somber tone. Had this version of Born in the USA appeared on Bruce's 1984 album of the same name, there may have been a lot less confusion, but certain tweaks to the song resulted in it being taken completely in the wrong way and being still misrepresented to this day. For the studio version of Born in the USA, the song begins with Max Weinberg's upbeat drums. Then Roy Bittan delivers an uplifting 6-note melody on his keyboard, cementing it as a positive song. The intention was for a, quote, Southeast Asian sort of synthesized strange sound. Instead, the result was an incredibly upbeat melody. The earlier demo started with the lyrics "Born in a Dead Man's Town." In the studio version, it starts with a chorus of "Born in the USA." It was sung in a mock celebratory fashion in the hope that people would notice how much it contrasts with the verses, but people didn't hear the verses and instead focused on the patriotic chant of the chorus. Once the song was out there, it simply took on a life of its own. In September of that year, the conservative commentator George Will went to one of Springsteen's concerts and wrote a now infamous appraisal of Springsteen for the Washington Post. He wrote, "If all Americans, in labor and management, who make steel or cars or shoes or textiles, made their products with as much energy and confidence as Springsteen and his merry band make music, there would be no need for Congress to be thinking about protectionism." He then admits that he doesn't know anything about Springsteen's political views and says, "I've got no clue about Springsteen's politics, if any, but flags get waved at his concerts while he sings songs about hard times. He's no whiner, and the recitation of closed factories and other problems always seems punctuated by a grand, cheerful affirmation, 'Born in the USA.'" He finishes the article with, "Springsteen's tour is hard, honest work and evidence of the astonishing vitality of America's regions and generations. They produce distinctive tones of voice that other regions and generations embrace. There still is nothing quite like being born in the USA." George Will was an unofficial campaign advisor for Ronald Reagan, who was at the time running for his second term as US president. And 6 days after George Will's column was published, Reagan was on the campaign trail in Springsteen's home state of New Jersey. Reagan turns to the crowd and says, "America's future rests in 1,000 dreams inside your hearts. It rests in the message of hope and the songs of a man so many young Americans admire, New Jersey's own Bruce Springsteen." This statement then receives rapturous applause. A week later, Springsteen spoke while performing at a concert and said, "Well, the president was mentioning my name in his speech the other day, and I kinda got to wondering what his favorite album of mine must have been. You know, I don't think it was the Nebraska album. I don't think he's been listening to this one." Springsteen also did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine to distance himself. He said, "I think what's happening now is people want to forget. There was Vietnam, there was Watergate, there was Iran. We were beaten, we were hustled, and then we were humiliated. And I think people got a need to feel good about the country they live in. But what's happening, I think, is that need, which is a good thing, is getting manipulated and exploited." Reagan's opposing candidate for the Democrats, Walter Mandel, tried to get himself in on the controversy too. He said, "Bruce Springsteen may have been born to run, but he wasn't born yesterday." This was an open goal for Mandel to take shots at Reagan, but he messed this up by claiming that he was endorsed by Springsteen, something Bruce Springsteen's manager forced him to retract. But Springsteen's vocal criticism of Reagan only went so far. This has led some people to the conclusion that Bruce Springsteen was unknowingly responsible for getting Reagan re-elected in 1984. Kyle Smith, a critic for the National Review, wrote, "Back then, hit LPs were a kind of American wallpaper. You'd see them everywhere. Everyone spent a lot of time in malls. All of the malls had record stores, and all of the record stores displayed their best-selling and most eye-catching albums. Sticking in the top 10 all summer, Born in the USA, featuring Springsteen's white t-shirt and blue jeans in front of the flag stripes, was emblazoned on America's retina. It was an unintended gift to Reagan's re-election campaign. It helped make America feel good about itself, even great about itself." Bruce was asked about this in his Rolling Stone interview and said, "Well, we had the flag on the cover because the first song was called Born in the USA. And the theme of the record kind of follows from the themes I've been writing about for at least the last 6 or 7 years. But the flag is a powerful image, and when you set that stuff loose, you don't know what's going to be done with it." Former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, attended a concert during the Born in the USA tour and noticed how the song's message had simply been lost. He said, "Bruce started every show with a really rousing, anthemic-type version of Born in the USA, with a bandana on and a cut-off shirt and the fist pumping. It felt like a celebration of being born in the USA, when really it's a defiant song about, I was born in the USA and I deserve better than what I'm getting. I think plenty of people didn't get what it was about, including the President of the United States." By 1995, Springsteen once again addressed the misunderstanding behind the song and what had happened. He said, "After it came out, I read all over the place that nobody knew what it was about. Born in the USA, I'm sure that everybody here tonight understood it. If not, if there were any misunderstandings out there, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, and my children thank you, because I've learned that's where the money is." Once people are finished laughing at this joke, he turns to the crowd and says, "But the songwriter always gets another shot to get it right." Springsteen then plays the song like the original demo on an acoustic guitar with the chorus played in a quiet and somber tone. Chris Christie was also at this tour and said, "Much different feeling, much different sound. I can remember, at the show I went to see at the State Theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey, a couple of people started to try to sing with him, and he stopped in mid-song and said, 'I can handle this myself.'" And it would seem that by now the message was loud and clear. Springsteen had nipped it in the bud that this was not the patriotic song that it was portrayed to be. But again, this got lost in translation. A year later, Republican candidate Pat Buchanan used Born in the USA for his election campaign, as did his fellow party member Bob Dole in 1999. The irony of using an anti-war song to espouse their largely pro-military views was lost on both occasions. And even today, it continues to be played as a patriotic national anthem, regardless of whether that was the intention of the song. Perhaps the best and worst thing about music is that people will attach their own meaning to it. Make sure to subscribe for more.